I've been homeless. I bathed in a church bathroom, won 19 Grammys, had a career that was beyond my imagination. I've survived death several times, endured public shame, but nothing could prepare me for what God had in store for me in 2023.
Hey, it's Jay. I'm back in for another one, and tonight I have with me.
It's Drew. I'm talking in my NPR voice, just like Jay. Should I do this show as Drew or Pastor Drew? Which one do you want me to do it as?
You
It's
know
up
what?
to you.
In
It's
this
up to you.
situation, we're gonna need a little bit of both. I'm gonna need Harvey Dent in this piece tonight. It's that kind of a situation, man. It's that kind of a situation.
Yeah, now I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. It's interesting. The topic of this conversation, as you can tell from the title, of course, we're going to talk about Kirk Franklin's documentary. It's a short documentary, like 30-something minutes, called Father's Day. Full disclosure, I'm not necessarily a fan of Kirk Franklin. And to be honest, I never really was a fan of Kirk Franklin. Part of it's partially due to my raising and coaching, and we're used to music and being a certain kind of way. You know, it can be hard. It can be hard to take in things. You're just used to a certain regiment, certain things being a certain kind of way. If it's outside that way, it's hard to take in, and you see it as a problem, right? But with time and me getting older and, you know, wisdom and living, which was the primary factor that changes somebody's perspective and mindset about things, I started kind of seeing like certain things that you would see as being a problem or having a problem with isn't really that big of a deal. And the truth is, especially when it comes to like salvation or the world or your place in the world and how you feel about things, all that kind of stuff, it's like everybody's trying to figure it out for themselves, you know. And sometimes we can have the mistake of thinking that if you control the environment, you control what's coming in, you know, that's where the power is controlling the environment. But, you know, living, I've come to understand that, you know, the power is in your understanding and what you hold inside to help you deal with those things on the outside, because you can't control the environment, you can't control the world. All you can control is you. And even though that's a lot of accountability that a lot of folks don't want to have to deal with or be accountable for, it's the truth of it. And so the world is supposed to be the world. World's going to be what it's going to be. People are going to be what they're going to be. Environment's going to be what it's going to be. Society's going to be what it's going to be. But you're responsible for who you are within that world. And so with me feeling that way about it and coming at it that way, it sure kind of made things easier for me, for one. So I won't always constantly think I have to fight, pull, convince, and change. It's more or less like I have to be responsible for me and my part in this world, and that's enough to keep me busy without having to try to worry about all the outside forces and stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, that's a well said intro. You know, for me, watching this documentary, as it pertains to like my response to what you just said, I grew up, you know, in a household that was Kojic. Like I grew up Kojic elder, my stepfather Kojic elder, mother a missionary, before she passed away, was on the motherboard. You know, like this is my background. And I think my stepfather never really was one that like was a huge fan of like Stomp, you know, but also there was, you know, but the reason why I sing all those other type of songs, the other worship songs he could get with. So they were in our household. I grew up, you know, I had older sisters who were, you know, trying their best to cling to the church life that they were raised on. And so your Kirk Franklins and the different people that were coming about at the time were who they listened to. So I knew Fred Hammond and all those type of people, you know, from back then, commissioned all that black church music, John P. Key, all this,
and the Winans and the Clark sisters and Dietrich Haddon later on and all that. And,
So I'm well versed in like in gospel music in that particular way and understanding how the figure that Kirk Franklin was.
Yes.
I knew a little bit of his story, and I think whether someone could say it's propaganda or not to sell an album, I think as a documentarian, I can honestly say watching this, you'll hear me say this about other documentaries or about my own.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're making a documentary breaks out, you know, like
Yeah.
you've got one subject and then boom. And I honestly do believe that he had a crew there just to do a making of behind the scenes, and then a real story broke out.
Yes.
And the breakthrough was one that I think is instrumental. So my feeling about this film, without going into the details, is that if you haven't seen this film yet, before this discussion gets going, so that you're not swayed one way or another, I think it's important that you would stop right now and watch it. That's one. But also, and this may be a little bit swaying, is that I think that if you are a person who is dealing with some issues with family from the past and other things, I think it's very important for you to watch this. I think it's important for this to be a generational watch. Meaning, I think this is if you're blessed to still have your mother and grandmother and those type of people around, I think this should be something you should watch and discuss some of the points, because we could heal from some of the things that are addressed in this film.
Yeah, that's true. Even in the beginning of the documentary, he even starts off talking about what his plan was, you know. But with almost like with any kind of art that you kind of stay open to, like you said, the art happens during the process. You know, you can have the sketch, you can have the idea or whatever laid out, but if you stay open, you know, more than likely what you start off with won't be what you end up with. And if you're open and honest with it and accepting, you get so much more than anything you would have planned in your wildest dreams. This was a lot. I'm trying to think what's the best way to start it without being, because it's tied with so much stuff. Like you said, it's with family relationships, it's with the things we bring upon ourselves, a lot of shame, a lot of stuff to do with like sense of self and what gives you that, and the denial of information and us as a people.
Yeah.
And the pitfalls we fall into, and a lot of times at this point they're of our own doing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't created by us. And so it's almost, once you pull one piece out, it just makes the whole thing crumble. And we're just moving off of moves that was done to us a long time ago. It's like you're on a ride and you know you need to get off, but you don't remember where you got on at. And so sometimes getting off the ride is scarier than the piece it might bring you for being off. But the change is just so scary. You've just been so used to trauma and confusion and being lost, that being found, truth, and realization is scarier than the lies, confusion, and being lost.
Yeah. I think one of the best places for us to start with this, for anyone, like from this point on, from the discussion, is just to say that, like, we're going to do a brief outline of what the film is about, which does give up a lot of information. So this is one of those points where we're giving you the spoiler alert warning at this point. You know, and the way I think about this film is, like we discussed earlier, there was an attempt to make a promotional film for the new album. At that point, the album did not have a name yet, just him working on his projects to fulfill his contractual duty. And so in the middle of this happening, he gets some news about his from a friend, mm-hmm. that he could potentially find his birth father. We're going to go a little bit more in depth into this factor here in a second. But basically what this movie does is it goes on a journey of what it takes to bring in that much information while also going through like this artistic process. So he's got a lot of different things going, and so he has to process gaining something he's always wanted, but also losing something he's always wanted in his mother, regaining and trying to build a better relationship with his estranged son, which is, of course, we're going to get into that conversation a little bit later on too. And then we also are going to talk about just the integrity and the importance and how well of a job that they did with even telling the story as it was. And there were some interesting notes that, about the film with some people who were in it and not in it. And we'll mention some of those things a little bit later on too. So really good film, really good short watch. It's nothing that's going to like take your day away, but I can tell you this, it will make you cry. So
for sure.
like,
I wasn't prepared for all that. I wasn't. Yeah. I was not.
It will definitely make you cry. Where do you want to start with this? You want to kind of start at the beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, we had previously kind of mentioned, one of the things that Kirk Franklin, they're sitting around and he's had some of the same people that he's worked with for years. And you can see all these Isaac Curry and all these different familiar faces coming in to help work on the new album. And one of the familiar faces, one of the people that he's worked with now through the years, close family friend, goes to the funeral for someone who's actually his relative.
Yeah.
And there's a man there who said he used to date Kirk Franklin's birth mother. And this friend is looking at the man and seeing his mannerisms, seeing his body type, his size, and is thinking and putting the dates together. And so the discussion is apparently had, and the man is like, hey, if there's a possibility, then reach out to him and let him know that I'm willing to give him. And the man actually did his own DNA test.
Yeah.
And said, Kirk, do with it what you will, which is an important factor because it really kind of proved that, hey, I don't want anything. He didn't go public with it. And one of the things we learned from the film, which is one of the horrible parts of celebrity culture, is that once Kirk Franklin went public with his story years ago about being adopted,
right,
he's dealt with people down through the years trying to attempt to come into his life and claim to be his biological father.
Right.
And so this was something he had to be very protected and shielded about. But he goes into, the process of matching the DNA. That in itself, I just recently went through something like that with a very, very close relative that didn't tell him I was going to talk about this. So I'm not going to hint to a name or how close in relationship the person is to me. But we just went through an elder telling this individual that their father may not be their father. And we had to go through a paternity test with the potential father. And it was 6 months of emotion of just taking it slow, figuring it out, not being in too much of a rush, because thinking about the what if it is, what if it ain't, looking at your family, doubting yourself, looking and say, do I look like them? All these different things came rushing in. And as that person finally dealt with, was able to deal with it and get the test done, and the test confirmed that the person wasn't, it was a sigh of relief, but it was also just a lot then left on the plate to deal with. So had just recently gone through that. The documentary made me cry even more because I was thinking about my particular loved one.
I haven't experienced this, what he went through. Like I said, even from the beginning. Okay, so normally he comes off to me very arrogant, very full of himself. He's almost too much, right? He's almost too much for me. All that dancing, whooping and stuff he does is just like, it's a lot. Now, he does brilliant music and stuff? Oh, yes. And he could direct a choir and he layers stuff well and catchy songs. Brilliant artist. I just didn't particularly care for him. But, I didn't know how he was raised. And it's funny because if you like people, you like them, and you shouldn't necessarily have to curb your films for somebody because of their story. Like if it's a sad story, you should forgive them or anything like that. I don't necessarily believe that. I kind of think like you might empathize with somebody, but that doesn't mean that you have to accept something just because you don't agree with it. You know,
empathy can't dismiss you being
you
being
still
a
have your
bad
issues
person
or have your issues with somebody.
Yeah.
But this is the first time I seen him, and I didn't feel that air about him. Like what he was saying, and this is him just talking about growing up and to be adopted, which I didn't know he was adopted. You know, the woman that was a relative to him, he didn't say exactly how, was 64 and he was 6 years old. And it was just them. And for him to kind of like, you know, one side, it feels like nobody wants them. The other side, somebody do want them, but may not have the capacity to give everything that's needed, right? And so, and he mentioned this stuff about knowing who his mom was, and she was there but not there, and he wouldn't see her that often. So all that stuff, it's just you know, we just don't know what people are going through, and but we always see the effects of it, you know what I mean? And but it's just out of context, and it's just so interesting. And like I said, it's just like it was just another reminder to me to make sure I keep my feelings about things or thoughts about things kind of tempered, because you just never know. You know, like I said, that don't mean you have to be around somebody you don't care for, but then you can also still empathize and understand. But at least keep that part open, because that makes a difference. That makes a difference for you and the person that you're dealing with.
It does. And, you know, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of how I really feel what you're saying. And I don't mean this in a messy way, y'all. I know you're listening, but like, listen with me for a second. I grew up going to church, but I also grew up not the pastor's kid, but like one, you know, like I didn't grow up. We didn't have money, you know, that type of thing. So there's some hierarchy.
Yes.
And there are people in the church that, because they have position, and it reflects the corporate world, it reflects school, it reflects the world, to be honest with you.
Yes.
So the church can make you feel some kind of way about yourself, and you can be treated some kind of way, and it's some people who fit these roles that can treat you some kind of way. So I remember seeing family members and different people who were in church and got treated some kind of way by the choir director because they couldn't get the silver top with the black pans for for Sunday for YPWW, you know, choir or whatever. Like, you know, like I knew, I had to throw that one out at you. When you told me he was coaching, I was like, oh, he'll know this. You can't, now you couldn't pay me to tell you what all that stood for. It's like young people something, but I don't know. But now there's a hierarchy. It can make you feel some kind of way. And I think for me, it is taken into my latter years of adulthood. Like I'm talking the recent years, for me to really kind of be honest that some of it comes from whether it was, I felt some kind of way because these people were fancy appearing and highfalutin, and they had their whole little thing. You know, they was dressed nice. We couldn't afford to dress nice. Some of it's that I got a little bit older, and it was like, you know, me being a pastor, I'm like the pastor with no education, and I'm conscious and aware that I'm treated different than the pastors with doctor in front of their name, and the people who have this level of education. I'm not given the same opportunities or talked to the same way. Like I'm boots on the ground. I'm the guy who's always out there, you know, with the homeless people doing all these different things. I'm like in the dirt. I'm in the trenches. I'm that kind of pastor, but I'm not the theologian, right?
Right.
And theologians are treated one particular way. Choir directors are treated one particular way. It's like, but the people who are, and I don't concern myself with it, but it took years for me to say that now I'm not concerned with it. But when I was starting in the church, in my adult journey, the trauma from seeing how my parents were treated in the church, not that they had faced one particular abuse, but just the subtle everyday, like just seeing the way they were talked to, seeing the opportunities they got to speak and all those type of things in comparison to the others. Church sometimes can make you feel other. And I think that was my attitude toward not gravitating toward Kirk Franklin's personality initially, because he seemed like one of those people that wouldn't have been safe for me. Like he would be like, I couldn't, you know, and not knowing the man at all, but the persona he gave off.
Exactly.
And so I just want to throw that out there because it may sound kind of like, well, of course I didn't know. Of course we don't know him and we shouldn't judge him. And that's fun to say in retrospect. But if we keeping it real, we do. We all do it in different ways.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
And that's just my truth about it. So like, I really seeing him and being able to relate to him in a way of like, oh, he was outcast too. Yeah. And maybe that's why he go over the top now. I don't know. But he was outcast too. So I was like, that relatability factor is dangerous. It can make you like people.
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't like as much.
That's what I was saying. That's what I'm saying. I always try to temper it with like, knowing it doesn't make it okay or make it, but it made so much sense. Like I said, just to hear that. So to hear him, going through that, it just gave such a different kind of perspective. And then also not knowing himself. Because like I said, I thought the same thing just generically. I thought he was like one of those guys that always showed off at church. Always like, the pastor's kid or something. And, and he just used to everybody kind of going to him kind of like, oh, he's so cute. He's so talented. You would think that he was like one of those, right? And so to hear this and to be like, he was just kind of like always just kind of cast aside. And he probably was just always fighting so hard to win or to be seen that he don't know how to cut it off. Like even when he wins, he's still like the race is over. He's still running hard. And everybody looking like either somebody gonna see him think he's crazy or they're gonna think he's overly dedicated or they're gonna think he's an overachiever. Everything but that in his head, he never hit the finish line. Yeah. The race is never over. And then he's talented too. So he got a creative mind. So that's already a dangerous situation already. I'm personally speaking. that could be a beautiful thing, but a dangerous, crazy thing too. So to have that kind of, be a creative person with a roaming mind and not accepting what it is and to filter out things and to take the parts that's needed and disregard the parts that's not. It is a journey and an ongoing job. Okay, so with this documentary, how it came about, and like you said, the whole thing where, the way he discovered it. And it's funny, as soon as I heard about, they were talking about the church and the church people talking and the rumors getting around and stuff, I just had flashbacks of being a kid and you just kind of, you're not knowing exactly what's going on, but how little rumors and you hear your mom talking to sister so-and-so on the phone and how that rumor stuff and how the information just travels and stuff. It just reverted me back to a kid. It was just very interesting. Like I said, people normally hunting him down or throwing out that they could be his father, and to have this guy that was just at a funeral for his aunt and just mentioned to a family friend that, hey, I used to date Kirk's mom back in the day. I thought just like even Kirk even talks about how that could just be like a random funeral, random people talking, and how it just turned to something else. And for him to be 53, even sometimes when we have an answer and we know the answer isn't right, deep down, it's almost like we're being gaslit, even though it may be even self-inflicted. Sometimes we just don't know, but we know something is just not right. And you never get the confirmation. And we walk around with that. And even though we don't have the truth of the whole information to necessarily hurt us, because we know it, the lack of information could be just as hurtful and could affect us as well. And so many of us just walk around with secrets that could just kind of free people. But, are you willing to give them that freedom with the truth that you have? And so it was just so heavy. And in this situation, when this came up, and like I said, a guy offered his DNA and Kirk followed through. And when he got the information about that result, and him just kind of, and it was funny because you could tell he was listening at the information with different kind of ears, right? Like when I heard, so the doctor calls, pleasantries, got the information about the results, and we'll give you the results. And she says 99%, right? And I'm thinking like, well, that dude is his dad. Like she said 99. He is so untrusting of hearing information or processing information when it comes to this, that when she said 99%, his next question was, of what? Like, as in yes or no, scared to hope that the answer was 99% yes, that is your father. he needed to hear it. Like you have to say this to me. And so she confirmed, like, yes, he's your father. And then he's like, my father? And he's just walking back and forth, pacing, and normally he's dramatic anyway. So if the sound was off, if the sound was off and I didn't know what he was talking about, I would think, here he go again, being dramatic, talking to his phone, screaming at the phone, walking away, coming back, walking away, coming back. But it was so honest. It hurt my heart to see him. And like he said, he was told another guy was his dad, and he had come to terms with it, and he buried the guy a few years back. And he's like, this is my father. And he's like, I'm 53.
Yeah.
And I am just getting this information. I am 53. I'm 53 unhinged. I'm 53 broken with no sight of peace, no sight of balance. I'm 53. He gets information, he just can't believe it. And so the next thing is like, hey, I'm gonna call my aunt, and his aunt, oh my goodness, his aunt. It doesn't surprise me because it matches the mom, but he calls his aunt so he could get in contact with his mother, who he hasn't seen or spoken to in 20 years. And his aunt is almost acting like when he calls her.
Yeah.
And he says it's Kirk, and he says her name, and she's like, excuse me? As if he called the wrong number. But he knows how she is, and he's like, aunt, before he says her name. And she's like, oh, okay. And I'm thinking, like, anyway.
And I like that you could tell he wanted to address it, but he stopped himself. Because there was a greater mission at hand, yes. Which is the bigger discussion I feel like we definitely got to start having. And one of the reasons why I said this is a generational watch, because I would challenge anyone, if you're watching this, if you watch that documentary, to have that conversation forward to so for example, I have a 24-year-old, a 22-year-old, and a 21-year-old, right?
Right.
And a 16-year-old. I can even include him in the conversation too, because it starts early. You're raising them. They don't belong to you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you at some point have to recognize these are going to be full-blown adults that are deserving of respect and honor. And to take a 53-year-old man who's accomplished a lot. I won't say more than you or anything like that, because I don't know that woman's life. But Kirk Franklin has probably accomplished a lot more than most people. And I'm saying that on the level of not monetary and fame. I'm talking just pursuing his dream, and just going after it. This man deserves respect. If he wants to call at 53 years old, and you didn't come pick him up on the weekends, you didn't come bring him clothes.
Exactly.
If he want to call you by your first name,
yes,
it's perfectly permissible. That ticked, I think, everybody off who watched it. I think everybody was like, probably called that woman a name real quick. And
he wanted to too, but he knew to catch himself. And the sad part is, there is not one black man that when he heard him talking to his aunt and she kind of checked him like that, we all knew, shut up. Because it's not going to work out if you do not submit.
Yeah.
And I'm grown, and I knew, I don't know a black man who didn't read the room and know that,
Yeah, I knew what she was getting at when,
but I'm talking about we as black men, we know with the moms, we know how that goes, where it's not about who's wrong or who's right. It's like, you're the child and you shut up. And it's just like,
yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why that conversation got to start being had, because that was one of those generational curses that I've had to break. Because if I would have kept that attitude, I would not be as evolved in my relationship with Christ. I would not be as involved as a man, because my 21, 24-year-old, they teach me. I learn from them. And of course they learn from me. It ain't a reversal of the situation. I'm still dad. But I also need to learn from them, because, dude, I can sit here and tell you right now, I can be in a room with some people I couldn't have been in a room with 10 years ago, but my kids have taught me how to be in a room with them.
Yeah.
So my witness has expanded. My love has expanded. My life is more full, because I actually listen and don't disrespect. If my kid accidentally forget to say sir, yes, sir, or something like that, I don't know. I'm not gonna die. I
Yeah.
mean, 'cause-
Yeah. It's just like single household families, there's many ways to get to that. And it's not always the same situation, right? The end result, mom with children.
yeah,
Especially with growing boys. If you don't have that balance of a dad to kind of offset the emotions that could be stirred by a mother, it could be an interesting
oh yeah,
situation.
I do it every year. It's a part of my fathering.
It could be hard without that, you know. And so that balance is really needed. And not having that balance is so much. I'll liken it to this. When the balance is off on steering on a car, both the left and right side are trying to do the same thing. It keeps balance. It's just as much pressure on one side, on the right side, as it is to the left. But let one of those tires be off, the power from the other side is going to swing so hard without anything to offset it. And so the car will not function correctly because there's not any balance. It's not wrong for being the left tire, and it can't compensate for the right one. And so when it's not right, it just throws off everything. All the tires and the car are just jacked because there's no balance to offset. And we're getting in these households where it's just like the mom and these kids, and it's nothing to offset. And so it's creating a different type of person. I'll say that. I think it's the nicest way I could say it at this time. I think it is a factor.
Yeah,
And a lot of men, boys that are now men, or men who are still boys trying to figure out how to be a man, is trying to catch up on what manhood is, being able to speak to authority and all that kind of. It's so tied in with so much stuff. We got grown men that can't even speak to authority because they never had any weight or anything respecting their views, their thoughts, their positions. And so everything is just,
yeah. No, it's important that, and I always take it maybe 2 or 3 steps too deep with this, but I think the conditioning that takes place when you enslave a group of people for generations, that our understanding of tribe and understanding of how we care for one generation and empower a generation so that we can, like me and you are at these stages of our life where we should be preparing to leave the warrior stage and enter into an elder stage. And as we, like, which means we should, as our kids are getting a little bit older, we should pass down and allow them to be able to speak with authority and speak and handle business. And we should be able to dignify in a dignified way, be able to be honored when we speak, but also understand that the show's not on us. It's the shows are ran by the warriors. They're ran by, and the elders are here to support. And I think sometimes we're so used to thinking that we have to do it all that we don't understand the roles that we are kind of made and designed to do within community. And
we never transition out into the next position. And so we're holding up the seat for somebody who needs to be there, who has the mind frame, who has the energy. Like when you say the warrior, yeah, that's true, because you can't have anything to lose. It's all given to the cause. Because when you having family and all that kind of stuff, then you give to the family, and the more you have to lose, and your options dwindle from even your dreams to everything else. Everything kind of takes back seat to when you're younger and all you have is space and opportunity.
Yeah. And so I think the thing that I loved about this part of the documentary is that Kirk is getting this information and now he has to bring it to his mother, and there's this secondary to even get access to her. So there's more to that story that the documentary didn't reveal for the sake of Kirk. Also, this wasn't supposed to be like this salacious piece, so he honored her and never mentioned why she wasn't necessarily in his life in a derogatory way, and why there's the auntie in between as the in between. But I think we were able to also, if you are a conscious adult and you know how a adult mind functions, I think you can kind of pick up on that there is some forms of like there's something mentally not connecting, which it could be from the result of, drug use. It could be the result of just, not properly regulated, all these different things. But the thing of telling, like that Kirk finds out that this man from the past who's already passed away was his father. And a few years ago, he had to come to terms with something I think was key that helped him go into this situation with a lot of grace, was that he spent and these are his own words, he spent his whole life hating one particular man.
Yeah.
And then in the 11th hour, through the God that he loves, and had to put to the test what he preaches and sings about, is like, okay, but will you forgive?
Yeah.
And will you let go? And he had to let go of that anger, and he had to kiss that man, and he had to put that man to rest and walk away from it. It doesn't, forgiveness doesn't mean that you don't still deal with it. Death doesn't mean that issue's gone, ain't nothing I can do about that. No, it's still there. But he started the process of forgiving that man, and he did the outward act of forgiving that man. And then to find out that could you imagine the anxiety of getting these results? And this is at the point where he doesn't really know this man yet.
Yeah.
The anxiety of, is this round 2? Well, I now have to take this hate out the jar. Like, I gave this hate up. I supposedly got rid of it.
Right.
Got rid of the hate for who abandoned me.
Right.
Now, am I going to pick it back up, or am I going to show myself to really be redeemed? And that was a good moment for him, as far as but he had to go to the mother first to just, he needed from her confirmation so badly, that because it was that confirmation that she could provide was going to give him permission to love. And he needed that. He was looking for that confirmation in the wrong place, but that's why he was going to her in that moment.
Yeah, and it was very interesting too, because the first thing when he was yelling like, that's my father, he was like, she lied to me. Like, my mother lied to me again.
Yeah.
And this is before he gets together with the aunt and the mother, and they're going for the second DNA test, another one. And he has the results there, and he's sitting there with the father and the auntie and the mother, and they're saying like, the results says here again, we did it again. And, saying that he's my father, and she won't look at his father, and she's saying this is wrong. Ain't no way how this could be. And he's like, I just want the truth. He wants that confirmation, even though that whole thing with the DNA and all that kind of stuff, I think it's a mixed bag, but in this case, I just come on now. Like, you got this smoking gun, and you got blood on your hands, and you talking about you don't know nothing about.
Remember, even the aunt said he just wants the truth,
right?
Which tells me, oh, you've been complicit. Like, to me, it felt like she knew too, a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I can't say that yes or no, but it felt that way.
It's possible, but for sure everybody knew, including the mother, with that DNA test saying 999. Like. It's almost like the mic drop. But she didn't even say I slept with him one time. She didn't say nothing. It's almost like I've never seen him before. How could this possibly be possible? She didn't say I was drunk or I was passed out. Anything. She could have said anything. She was straight up no.
I think part of that, and this is my thoughts on this real quickly, is that I think that what happens, especially for African American women, for Black women in American society, always kind of being at the bottom of the totem pole in so many different ways, that I think instinctually that sometimes Black women they protect themselves in a way that it can go cross generations. Meaning, I saw that woman trying to protect the little girl, so there's this she said, I slept with this person, and that's who your daddy is, Kirk. And it was this other person. And she still, even at 73 or whatever age she might be, she would be younger because she was probably young when she had him. But she's, even at this big age that she's at, whatever it might be, I think sometimes you go back to that. It's an arrested development moment when you make certain decisions as a kid in their life-altering decisions, sometimes you lock and you don't grow and evolve. You just stay in place and try to protect that kid. And I've seen this happen in real life where people will deny, like especially people, and I'm not saying anything about his mom directly, just out of my experience working in drug rehab. People need something to feel good about themselves because they've been the worst of society, as you know, as far as society's view on them. So the one thing, even if it's a lie, the one thing that they can say that they got, they hold on to it, and they don't let you throw extra dirt on them. Like, hey man, did you commit this crime back in '98? No, like no one wants to add that. And I think I just felt like watching her, the piece of sympathy that I would say that I had for her was that I could see that she held on to that lie because she was still trying to protect that little girl from being called the neighborhood hoe or blah, blah, blah.
So why would it be, okay, how would it be any different than the guy she said was the father? It's still a guy. It's still a guy she slept with. So...
But, you know, I think she just didn't want to admit that she had slept with a couple of different men, that there was a couple of different options. Like, you know, nowadays, that ain't, you know, body count ain't nothing. But back then, you know.
I get it, but even... She might not want to admit it, but when you're coming down to a situation where you have a whole human being that's...
you got to get past yourself and make a decision. I
guess anything is possible, but when you have a whole human being there, and all other parties have probably passed away by then, because she got to be at least in her 60s, you know, or later, and so it's kind of like... to the point where she was even asking, like, will this answer, you know, affect our relationship? And I'm thinking, like, if you even know to ask that, then it's kind of like, it was sad regardless, but it's just kind of like, I don't know.
It made me question what relationship she wants with him.
One without accountability, obviously, for sure.
Which ain't in a relationship.
That's not fair, but I'm being kind of messy. But she don't want to be accountable, and you know what? And I'm wondering too, and it's none of my business or nobody else's business, but I'm kind of wondering, like, does he do stuff for her even though he's not in her life and stuff like that? I'm kind of wondering what is there. I know he doesn't talk to her stuff, but that doesn't mean people don't do stuff for people. So I'm just kind of curious, like, is because if it's been 20 years and he's straight up not speaking with her, like it said on the documentary, like, it's almost like nothing else to lose. So what relationship are you concerned about? The one where you don't talk to your son for 20 years? You lost 20 years of not speaking, not talking, or dealing with, from the way it said it. What's your concern then? Because you kind of don't have a relationship.
Yeah, you know? You're absolutely right. Like,
he doesn't call you mother. He doesn't give you the title. But he said he can't because Gertrude was his mom, the 64-year-old that was raising a 6-year-old kid.
And you got to imagine the traumas he had to go through.
Yes.
With a woman who was born and went through, at that time, she would have been raising him in the late 70s or in the mid 70s, that type of frame, which means if she was 60 then, that means she was born in the early 1900s, lived through the Depression. You talking about a person who is so many generations away from this man. So how does she even get into a space where she could have even treated Kirk well?
And then also what was said, it wasn't in a documentary, but I heard an interview where he was speaking about how when she was in her 70s, I think 74, he said that she ended up getting married again. So I guess miracles do happen. But she got married when she was 74, and he was like early 15, 16 or something like that. And he said he kind of had nothing because she kind of wanted to get into the next stage of her life. Like she found somebody, and she kind of, so if nothing was really hardly going on before, it really wasn't when she kind of got booed up. And so, you know, I'm sure he's just always been on shaky ground, no foundation. And no true sense of self or anything else. So he's just been kind of on survival mode all his life.
You know, and you know, the other time he showed restraint, just to go back to this, you know, when they went in for the second DNA test, or when they went to the house, I forgot, but the auntie comes to the car and was like, "Get your A out the car."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yo, this is wild that this woman," and he's like, "Sign the documents. I'm making a documentary." Let me tell you something. I pray to have a subject that is that strict about what we're doing, like when we're shooting. And I understand he's probably like executive producer of it and everything, but it's like, I gotta have people sign every time I record something. I gotta have on record that I have this person's permission, right?
Right.
That's a serious thing when you're shooting something, because if you don't get that, you might as well not shot at all.
Right.
Because legally, you can't, it's trash. You can't do nothing with it.
Right.
It will be taken out right away. And so, like, her not understanding that, not wanting to sign, it's like, yeah, please sign this. And then I can get out the car, because they have to follow me.
Yeah.
And now that the story's happening, so I appreciated him pressing her on that, but it also irritated me how she still kept disrespecting.
Well, he made a good point about how he wants to kind of keep the narrative and he wants to have his experience, and he's trying to be conscious of staying in that and not letting it get ran off by other folks, which he's, making sure he kind of sets it up in a certain kind of way where this stuff doesn't happen, off the track. And, he's reading the room and he knows what he's dealing with, and he knows there's going to be some mess. And the first thing I thought when he asked her to do that, which was like, he's smart, because if he hasn't been dealing with these people for all these years, he knows that it's not stable and can't be trusted. So only thing that he can trust is the fact that if it's signed, they can't pull it or use it or pull it over his head or use it over his head later saying, no, I changed my mind, or extortion or whatever else. And so honestly, it's messed up. But I was thinking, like, I wonder how much he had to pay them to sit down. Like, for his aunt and his mom to be there, I wonder how much he had to pay them to be there. And to pay them to be there for her to still deny him the truth, because she didn't give it and walked out. And I'm thinking, like, okay, it's amazing how the real victim is sitting there and you denying him confirmation and peace of mind, but you're the one upset, crying and upset and walking away the victim. It's like, you can't be the victim and the aggressor. You got to choose a lane. Can't be both. And for sure, he was the victim in this story.
Well, and I know that when, we can't say what she wants one way or another. But we do know one thing for certain. That's a badge of honor to be able to say to the world, Kirk Franklin's my son. And it's a good thing. Like, and I can call him up. And I got access to him. And it ain't a sad story attached. And I think she walked away crying, having no more in the fact that you are never going to get that thing that you want. Access to one of the biggest mistakes you made. Like when like whether it was on purpose or like whether it was a good thing or not, but it was like, hey, she may live with it as a regret, not a mistake. Let me say one of what she may feel is one of her biggest regrets.
It's interesting because she was saying she was crying because she couldn't have what she always wanted, and I'm thinking, like, you're the reason why you don't have what you want. I don't understand. And he's giving you a direct line to what you want, and so I was but like I said, trauma and years of situations and things happening. So it's like, I'm on the outside just looking, but it was just kind of it was a lot. It was a lot, but I'm like, yeah, you're saying it's all you wanted, but everything you've been doing, from giving him up to being not a constant in his life to neglect and all the rest of that kind of stuff, is the reason why you don't have what you want. It's almost like you act up, you cut up, you don't respect the situation, you steal, you trash the house, whatever, and you're wondering, like, and all I want to do is hang out with you. And I'm thinking it'll be like, well, you're not respecting the environment. I'm not saying her with him, but I'm just saying that's like somebody doing all these things that's ejecting them from the situation and wondering how come they're not being embraced and taken in. And it's like, well, you're feeding into your situation. There's got to be some kind of accountability to it. And if somebody's saying, hey, if you want to be here with me, I need this from you, and you can't give that, then it's kind of like, it's unfortunate if you don't want to give it, but that's the deal. That's the barter for the relationship. It can't just be like, and a lot of times when you're in a situation where you're the one that has the power, you can run things you want. You can be unfair. You could be mean. You could be anything you want to be because the other person is stuck there under duress, like a relationship between a child and a parent and a child, or a boss and an employee. Those situations are not fair. And even though, it's just not, those situations are just not fair. And so she is not in the position of power in that situation. Well, I guess she has the power because she has the information. So in a way, she has power. But as far as like him, it's almost like, well, I'm gonna take it or leave it kind of thing, and that's what he's offering. And so it's almost like, I'm not gonna bend to me not being the one in power, and I'll just have to leave then.
One of the big takeaways that I took from this, that I think Al was also hoping that the majority of us kind of take away from it, is that the power of therapy was on full display. And I don't want that to be a missed point. For like a lot of times I've heard a lot of discussions about this, and I've heard people talk more or less about being angry at the aunt. Some of the details, and even some of the deeper church conversation comes up around who Kirk Franklin is and why he's been rejected over the years. Yeah. But I do feel that one of my favorite portions of this film was that the ability for him to set boundaries, that comes directly from therapy. His ability to conduct himself with a laser focus on the matter at hand, opposed to he didn't allow himself to get distracted, which is another show of boundaries.
Right.
But the honesty that he was able to display was very instrumental. Like, a lot of people don't, that documentary wouldn't have come out, And so I think when he began to, I could imagine the process that he has to go through to continue to do his professional duty and record this album, lead his family, because you still got to come home to your wife, and and to still be the man that he is when he's back at such a primal childlike emotion of like, he's dealing with this abandonment issue all over again. He's been hurt by his mama all over again. These are things that make you want to curl up and just kind of, literally what he's going through are the things that make you want to run to your mama.
Yeah.
And the irony of his mother being the cause of some of the pain is ridiculous. So, hats off to him for being faithful and going to therapy and dealing with it. And I think definitely hats off to the father, to the actual biological father, because he was patient.
Right.
And one of the things that we could pick up on just from the room that they showed the two of them talking in, it appeared on the surface level that his father, his biological father, doesn't really actually have a need for Kirk.
Exactly.
It seemed like he lived his life as an adult and has his home and has somewhere to lay his head, and doesn't seem like he needs anything. And his willingness to be patient, and by societal standards, most people would be like, you don't need to be contrite about it, you don't need to be sorry about anything. But he was sincerely sorry that because there is a certain level of hey man, if you have unprotected sex with someone, you got a responsibility. Now, whether you choose to shun that responsibility or not, but you do look back. You're supposed to look back. And you could say, well, I'm a kid, this, that, another. And I think that that's the part when grown man, you look back at the memory of who you was as a boy and you almost scold old you. Like you scold the boy in you for being like, man, why come we didn't pay closer attention?
Right. So did you believe him when he said he didn't know?
I don't.
Oh, really?
Yes and no. And hear me out
Oh.
on this. One of the reasons why I say, like, I do believe that he put himself in a position where he would not have to think about it again, right? But it is not, it's a small community. Things may have been said where the thought had to run, look, well, I'm bringing my own stuff to the table. So let me just say it like this. I think that if you see someone you slept with, they got pregnant later, it don't matter if everybody in the neighborhood is like, oh, that's Gerald's baby.
Right.
You still know when you slept with them, you would still think it. Even if you're a boy, I still think you think. That's the part I'm saying. I feel skeptical, but also, okay. I don't know. He could have, I don't know. And it seemed like a small community. So
It's a small community, but back in the day too. Because even when I was in school, girls would disappear with the stomach mumps and you just didn't know what happened. And they come back feeling better, but the next school year. And then you find out eventually that they had a baby and it's just like, what? So, and then even like our parents back then, they would ship you off to the South or some other family members or give the baby to somebody else, and people growing up with their mama thinking it's their sister. So I think stuff like that can happen and you don't know. And it's happened to people like Jack Nicholson, found out his sister was really his mama. So it's a lot of stuff happens that you may not know. And I thought it was kind of interesting too, the way the dad was kind of like, well, I wouldn't expect to, my stuff with this person to get pregnant, or this person, or this person, or this person. Just like I was kind of thinking, like the question would have been, well, Kirk, when you went on tour and you slept with all those different women, did you expect to for them to be pregnant with your child? Because it's possible too. So I don't know of everybody. Every time a guy sleeps with a woman, he's going to assume that he got her pregnant, unless
if
somebody said
something. You should. Yeah, I guess that's in theory, but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
If that's the case, we wouldn't have so many situations where women are checking 5 and 6 different guys and still not catching who the father is. If that's how that works, we're coming up with so much stuff as of recent times where, especially maybe because of all this child support stuff, where they're finding out that these men that on these birth certificates are not the father. How is that magic happening? With everybody being in close vicinities and everybody sleeping around whoever and everybody trying to figure out what's what. A lot of folks, I've known a few who thought that they were the father, even when the kid didn't even look like him, and we're just looking at him like, dude, we're not trying to be messy. And they just like, no, that's my lady, that's my, whatever. So that happens. That happens quite often. And like I said, now that they're doing that thing with the child support where they're going to have DNA testing of the father to make sure the father is the person that you put on the birth certificate, it's going to be very interesting, the truths that's going to be exposed and the who's who of stuff, because this is just a weird time of all this stuff being unraveled where we're just finding out years. I'm talking about people are like, Kirk is not the only 50-year-old who's finding out their father isn't their father. This is more common than we're thinking. It's a lot of turning the blind eye to or denial or whatever else, but it's been going on and happening. Some people knowing, some people not knowing, but it is a thing. It's a thing. Kerry Washington just came out not too long ago, a couple days ago, talking about she found out that her father is a sperm donor. So she didn't know her dad. So, and the parents not saying anything. That woman could have been in a car accident and died and not know that, and she's knowing like something doesn't really quite feel right. They love me, but I look a little different. All this kind of, yeah, man. The sad part about this story is he's not the only one. And it's a curse almost. And to have that many people walking around not feeling, it's hard enough with the world we live in, not to feel connected and part of something and feel like settled and all this other kind of stuff. And to know or to find out, those feelings proven to be correct because of the truth of the fact that that's not your that's not your dad. You know that.
Yeah.
That's a house with no foundation. And so whatever the weather is, good luck. Good luck. Because you have no base to stand on. Even if you buy good siding or get the best paint or get the best fence or whatever, or security system, if the right wind hit the right angle of that house, it is toppled. And good luck. And that wind might come when you're 14. It might come when you're 30. It might come when you're 53, making an album. That's crazy.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it forced him to also, as the documentary revealed, sometimes when those curses are broken, or when chains are being broken in your life, so to speak, and things are, sometimes breakthroughs for me have always gone forward and backwards. And I've had some healing and some different issues I had to deal with that I've gone through with my father. And what I noticed is that, like, some of the things that I didn't want for, you know, cycles to be repeated, you know, with my children, I also wanted them to stop for my father, you know, too, and stop for myself. And so I love that you could tell that even though he couldn't convey it in the film and probably can't convey it all the time, because of boundaries, I love that Kirk Franklin was excited about, you could tell, even though it was contained, he was excited about the premise of having a chance of having this thing he always wanted.
Yeah.
And one of the things that confirmed that feeling for me that he had that was that when he made a conscious decision to redeem himself with his son, like to talk with his son and to reconcile himself with his son, and to mention to his son that, like, this, you got this, grandpa, which people don't understand, that when a dad's not around and not in the picture, that kid is also always wishing they had another, like, even though that, you know, your mama might be the greatest grandma and your daddy may be the greatest grandpa to that kid is always going to wish they had an extra set of grandparents' house to go to. They're always longing for that. And to get this gift that Kirk got, and finding out who his biological father is, he had to give that gift to his son so that his son could have a grandfather. And I thought that was beautiful that he told him about it, and he started the rebuilding relationship, but it was centered around, you're getting something you needed too.
Yeah. So back real quick with Kirk's dad realizing that he was a father, and when Kirk passed him the results, and he just kind of burst into tears, talking about, I didn't know, and he had to take a moment to step away. It really touched me that, like, Kirk gave a disclaimer, and he mentioned hugs a lot throughout the documentary, right? Just when he was doing the narration and stuff. But when he told his dad, and he said, like, you know, man, I know you don't know me. I know, he said, and I know, you know, we're getting to know each other, but I just want to apologize. I want to tell you now, I apologize if this is not the best hug. Right? Like that meant, like that hug, like I said, he mentioned hug several times, and like he wanted to get that hug right. Like, you know, and it's very, and it's sad because, you know, okay, so stuff with his mom, you know, like even when he's a little kid, right, that it was always an issue, right, and he never felt wanted because she would keep leaving and whatever, and so maybe her actions even showed that she didn't want him or truly want him, even though she could have been going through other stuff to keep her away. But regardless, this is a guy who found out that he has a son, and he's like, I'm sorry, I wish I could have been there. And Kirk's just like, I was so close to having a father. Like he's not even thinking of the success he had and the awards and all the success and all that. He's thinking about, I was this close to having a father. Like he would have took Kirk Smith over anything, over his success and everything. Like it didn't matter. Like he was like, I was this close. And a guy living not too far from the studio or where his son would play and stuff right across the street, just all that stuff being in your vicinity, and you just this close from having what you want. It was always around him, just that close. That have to mess with his head. He wanted that, and that hug was so important to him. And I just thought, like, this guy finds out that that's his son. The whole time he's been trying to be like a part of it, and like, I'm sorry for the time that's been missed. I want to make up for it. We'll take our time and stuff. He wants him, right? And not for his money, like you said. He seems to be well-to-do, and he's fine. And I kept thinking, like, it's beautiful that Kurt is concerned about this hug, because this might be the official hug that he actually getting from a parent who wants him.
Oh, now.
Know what I'm saying?
Man, yeah.
This is 53 years. So I might not give it right. It might not be the best. So I'm giving you a disclaimer, because I want this hug to be the best hug ever given. This is the hug I've been waiting for 53 years. It's for somebody who I came from, who wants me to have this embrace. It was like crazy.
Yeah.
It was like crazy. I lost it, man.
Yeah. No, I think that right there. Yeah. That was one of those moments where, like I said, man, I just feel like, how do you even contain the excitement? It with that little boy inside of you, because I talk a lot about, because I believe we carry these former parts of ourselves, especially parts of ourselves that wasn't allowed to grow with us because they were like trapped and isolated within a trauma that we relive. And so when you start thinking about this boy being alone, being outcasted, being raised by this woman who was significantly older, and all these different things that he went through, and to now have just this simple thing that he wanted. And to me, it showed the power of God. Like, just to keep it real on that level, that's what broke me down in that moment, that it was like, it really ain't nothing that we can't ask for or think. There's not really anything that's within our man. That man, that can't even be in that man's imagination. You know what I'm saying? That he's already let go. And the truth came to light. Like, the truth actually, like, we say it as a cliche, but that was the truth coming to light. Like, it came out, regardless if she wants to stay in the darkness with that lie and pretend. It don't matter. She can stay in that darkness.
Yeah.
The truth came to light. This man has the one thing he always wanted, and that's a parent.
Yeah, that loves him, that wants him just as much as he wants them.
Now, the dream ain't two for him. You know what I'm saying? Like, when the deficit he's been at, the dream wasn't. He had already kissed and let go of the man that he hated all those years, that he thought abandoned him, was a part of the abandoning process. So none of that angst was in his heart about this man. He was able to get a father. He was qualified for the blessing because he had already let go of the things that could destroy the blessing that he had within him.
Now that's the truth. That's beautiful.
And that's the part that I was like, that's the part that broke me down so much. And that was that, like, it really makes you have to put some thoughts on what does it mean to forgive, and how forgiveness truly sets us free, and why it's such an integral part of our daily task every day to be forgiven and to forgive others, to offer it and receive it from ourselves. We have to sit still for and I'm talking, we're talking directly, I guess, to people who, if you're a part of a Christian belief system, is, I guess, who I could address here, or whatever your belief system is, I guess this could go. But sometimes you've got to sit still and hear that you are forgiven. And I say that in this particular moment just to say that, one, this was a part of the beginning of the church. They did that. This is part of what your instruction of meditate, like to do these things that we're supposed to do. God wants to talk, wants to tell you you're forgiven, but sometimes we don't ever hear that we are. So we move on and we behave a particular way. And as I see, we tend to move on and behave as though we're not forgiven, as though we are still caught up on the mistakes that we made. And I think Kirk hugging that man, instead of being an investigative journalist, he just, you know what I'm saying? He wasn't like, hey man, you know, like he didn't drag him. He hugged that man.
Right.
That's Kirk saying like, I forgive you for the mistake that you made. That's him saying like, and to think that gift that Kirk was passing out in that moment, his mother could have got that.
Yeah.
But pride comes before the fall, man. And she chose pride. And she's sitting at home right now with her pride, if you know, unless they've reconciled. But like sometimes what people lose out on, I can't even be mad at them. Sometimes that's what breaks my heart.
Yeah.
I think if we have a heart that's after God's heart, then we're gonna, sometime when we see those type of things, our heart is gonna break. In that same way, we're gonna look and we're gonna be like, yo, she walked away from her chance. And that breaks my heart, because regardless of what she said, I couldn't imagine being separate from any one of my kids.
Right.
I could make a mistake tomorrow that makes my kids say, I'm out.
Right.
And I will think, if I made that mistake and I got a chance, I'm running through that door. I'm busting that door now.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Yeah. I always pray that I stay on the good side of things with my family as well. So like you said, he goes to reconcile with his son to basically tell him that I got some information to tell you. He said, I could tell already. I'm not going to like it. Like, what is it? And he was like, you know, I found my father. And he showed him the video, I guess, basically of, you know, him finding out who his father is. The same video of him walking back and forth and, you know, she lied to me again, all that stuff. That's my father. That's my father. And it was just like, and his son just started breaking down. And, you know, and for him, he said, even for all the stuff, all I really wanted was my dad and my granddad. And it's sad, and it's so much truth in the situation that not making it all right, but you could kind of tell from the situation that Kirk's failing was the fact that he couldn't give something he didn't have or he never seen. And as much as we try to make up for the things that we were lacking, you know, we try to pretend to be adults. We pretend to be competent. We pretend to be all this kind of stuff. Like, if you don't have an example of that, it is so hard to be those things, because you don't have the foundation of where these things are stemming from. We could go through the motions of a lot of stuff. You know, just because you drive a car don't mean you know how to fix one or how one works. And we're doing a lot of driving with no understanding of how it works and what's propelling us. And it can make us dangerous. It can make us dangerous. It could get us into trouble fast because we know how it moves, but we don't know how to control or what controls. Because if you don't control or know how it works, it controls you. And it's only so much time before, you know, you might lose control because you have no basis to, let me gather myself. I need to have this in the beginning, this, that, and that's how I make sure this is stable so this could happen. You don't have that skeleton. You don't have it. And I think a lot of us don't walk around with those things. And because of that, it's only so long we could hang in there, even with best intentions. And and so even with that, I think him just hearing that just made him even, you know, that opened him up to even forgive Kirk with all the stuff they were going through. Because we heard about the porn stuff on Oprah, people, you know, having an issue with his music, him and his son getting into arguments, he's talking crazy to his son and all this other kind of stuff. It's just like, all that stuff is just dysfunction that just spilling over. The cost of that is his success, because people could just be like, I'm not dealing with Kirk Franklin because he can't even get along with his son. All this stuff is tied to that. So, you know, somebody who, you know, even if you have common sense, you could be the worst person, but you know how to act on TV because you don't want to lose everything. So somebody who's unraveling and their livelihood is tied into perception of what they are, and that's falling apart in public, you know, that's things getting out of hand that you can't even pretend and control. Same thing happened to Will Smith. As much as he tried to present and he held it tight on his perception that he wanted to give everybody, his foundation, we find out, was crap. And even that came in front of everybody. And it took him in his 50s as well to unravel.
Yeah.
Will Smith over here slapping people? The Fresh Prince, the guy who's joking about everything? The closest thing, we didn't have no respect for him like that, being like a tough guy until he became Mike Lowry in Bad Boys. Before, he was a joke. It took a character, Mike Lowry, for people to kind of like, oh, we could have an edge to him. You know, that was probably his release because he couldn't be that in anything else in his life, to the point where he's slapping somebody about a bad joke.
Yeah.
Oh boy, man. Ugh.
One of the thoughts that I'd had watching the film, and then I got on the internet and saw someone had actually posted a more in-depth thought on it, was that I really thought about how his wife was hardly in it at all. And I think part of it, one of the points that I read about that was that, could you imagine how hard it must have been for her to contain herself as a spouse?
Yeah.
And I could imagine that if someone like the mother, the aunt, that the aunt being disrespectful, or
Right.
the mother saying what, like, I don't know, as a spouse,
Right.
as much as I love my wife, if I could contain my words, I want to be there for her. I would want to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think I would have one of those, hey, we need to talk outside real quick, moments, because this blood test say 99.9, and my spouse needs you to give them this. Yeah, that had to be a difficult process for her to walk through. And I'm not saying she went off on anybody or anything, because I don't know, but I do know that all the other the family members involved and everything, if you love this person and you watch them go through, that's a tough thing to watch a person go through, because although, yes, I'm happy that this odd thing happened, and I did not think would ever happen in a million years, because I thought I buried my father. So the idea that, like, this is a Lazarus-like moment almost, and metaphorically, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But it's like, no, you're dead. You shouldn't. And then boom, now I have a father. But my mother's still the same. The contrast, the bittersweetness of it. But the sad thing is it's numb. The bitter is numb, because this is what he's always gotten from her.
Yeah.
And so I think that this film, a short film, heck, we've talked more about this film than we've talked three of the film. But it's like, I think for us, one of my biggest takeaways with this film is that, the beauty of when he called his son, the beauty of then taking it and turning it into the art. So he took this thing that was meant to destroy him.
Yeah. And
he gave this thing, and it started back when he had all this hate for one particular man, this one figure. And then he let that hate go. And now it's like, that allowed him to forgive and his son. It allowed, so you're talking about something that was meant to destroy him and his kids, and was meant to destroy, like, his legacy, meant to destroy, and I'm gonna say it whether people like it or not, this concept that we want to say these scriptures though it's cliche, but it's like, no, this God's word. It's like, the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. This man's ministry is meant to build up and to help us grow and have an appreciation. He gives us a safe space to enter into the presence of God with worship. And so if he's been gifted with this particular gift, don't be mistaken that there is a mission within the spiritual realm, as to kill, steal, and destroy that gift that he has. So from the beginning, there's been so much that's come against this man, and he shouldn't be where he's at. He shouldn't be sharing out of this space that he shares out of.
Yeah.
That has blessed so many of us in so many different ways. And all I'm saying, like, watching this, it helped renew my faith a little bit to be able to say, okay, God, you are still in control, and I do see you. I do see your hand. And sometimes I forget that God's hand is as mighty as it is. And I saw where Kirk let go. And this is not the cliche. He let go, and then God got busy. Like, he let God do it. Like, take it, and he did his part. And, you know, in life, and I would always tell the guys in rehab every day, there's your part, there's my part, and there's God's part. Guess what part you responsible for? and I would make them repeat back to me every day, like, my part, because I'm gonna do my part, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm gonna do my part without your assistance. Can't do it with your assistance, actually, because then it would not be your part. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't be my part. So it's like, there's my part, your part, and God's part. We ain't got a question. God gonna do his part. Are you gonna do yours? And are you gonna show up the way you're supposed to show up? That man following that inclination to say, yo, this might be my son, and I'm gonna go ahead and hand over my DNA. Like, that's big obedience. That's big, simple obedience. That's the stuff when only God can tell you to do something like that.
Yeah, all that stuff just fell in line in spite of all that stuff. Now that, like I said, the timing was the crazy part. Why didn't this happen years ago? But it's just interesting how when that one piece fell, how it just, and some of it was because of messiness, because of gossip. Some of it was because of, gossip that turned out to be the truth. It's just, it's like hitting all green lights. You just never know. But when you hit it and it just, straight line ahead, it's just something to see. And also how many close misses. Like, he could have bumped into that kid. His son could have bumped into his granddad and just didn't know it was him. Or Kirk could have bumped into his granddad at the local grocery store, or his father at the local grocery store, and not knew that man was his dad. We always see people that look like us. We think, oh, that's, we could be cousins, or joking around and stuff like that. Like, everything's just so scrambled. It's just yeah. I don't want to get back into all that, but it's just something.
Yeah. One of the big takeaways is, man, if you know, I think it's one of those things that if you think there's a chance, it makes you have to, let me just put this on my personality type. I don't have this long rap sheet or anything like that, but it makes you think back to the times where it's like, man, when I was not responsible, that I had done this. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have to teach our kids. This is part of that challenge of watching this as a generational watch. This is a good lesson for a young man. I'm not talking about somebody who can go out and actually get a woman pregnant, or, I'm talking about somebody who can't get a person pregnant yet. They need to know before they're eligible in that particular way, biologically. They need to know that what you do sexually holds weight in this universe. Oh, yes. It holds serious weight in this universe, and it has repercussions that ripple. And there is no hero in this documentary. And although the father stepped up to the best of his ability considering it, he was just as unknowingly, but just as complicit with Kirk's pain, inadvertently, because there has to be, and we started off, we kind of rabbit trailed earlier, but this was part of the conversation of why we long to stay with the rules, or to stay with law, or to stay in these places, because it does keep us in a space of, but this is why God is always like, yo, I designed this particular thing for marriage. Outside of it, it can get sticky, and I think that's more power to them. I hope that they develop a great relationship. I hope Kirk is able to enjoy, a good 20, 30 years, or however long God's will is with this man, and enjoy it in perfect peace and have harmony. And I pray redemption and reconciliation. I keep saying the term redemption, but I mean reconciliation in most cases. I really hope that he's able to. And I guess reconciliation they never were reconciled. So I pray that there is a bridge and a softening of his mother's mind and heart, so that, and a humbling, so that she can have this thing that they both yearn for, and something that I honestly believe is a part of what I believe what God's will is in this situation. I believe that God, I can't sit here and say that if that's the desire of Kirk's heart, to have both his parents and in his life accessible and have as healthy of a relationship as possible, I pray that God's will be done in that particular way. And I really hope that means that, if that's the desire of her heart, that she does what she has to do to get there. Yeah. But it was good. I mean, it was a good movie. It was a good watch, man. I feel like it's so much more we could talk about with it, but also we have talked a lot about it.
I'm just thinking about our conversation now. This is definitely different than I was expecting, but it's definitely what I needed. It's interesting. As short as this thing was, like I said, it's 36 minutes or something like that. It's very short. But the truth of it is, as heavy as it was, I don't think I could have took anything a minute longer. You know what I mean? It was long enough. It's like like one of those city blocks. Oh, you walk a block? Yeah, a city block. So those are different. So something this honest, this powerful. It covered so much. It was very dense, but all the parts hit, and like I said, it gave me new eyes when it comes to Kirk Franklin. I will be buying this album Father's Day. It comes out, I think, October 6th. I don't think I own one of his albums. I don't. This one I will, just because this has a journey that we got pulled into, and I just kind of want to hear, what does he say about it through his art? I'm just curious. And yeah,
God's the master storyteller, man.
Oh yeah,
Kirk is not that good. You could get Ken Burns. It don't matter who it is. Can't nobody tell a story that masterful.
Yeah.
In real time. And you know what? And it was about the same length of a sermon. And the truth of the matter is, I bring up the factor that it was about the length of a sermon just to say that is what the church of God, like God's actual church, capital C church, not what we pretend and play and do. That is actually what church ministry is. I'm not even gonna say that's what it should look like, anything. That is you start in one level, you present it with an issue, and then you trust God in it, and you see the process and you walk through it. That's ministry in real life, just mapped out for us. And I just feel like, I'm with you in the sense that it's like I will definitely be streaming, which is my version of buying an album, like not illegally, but you know what I'm saying? It'll be on my Spotify.
Right, same here.
I'll pre-add it to my Spotify, and and I'll do it like any other album. I'll listen objectively. I have an emotional tie to it.
Yeah.
But this will be the first time that Kirk, because I saw with a preview where he's singing on it. And, in the past, every time he sings,
I know
that's a skipper.
But even on this one, even when it ended, he was trying to sing. He was like, "Oh, I'm gonna save my voice for the concert." I'm like, "No, you just can't sing. We know you ain't saving your voice. Y'all sing that part here. Y'all got that part. I'm saving my voice." I'm like, "Yeah, they got the whole part." And so we know he's gonna have a good choir singing and lead singing and stuff. He knows better. He can't sing, but he makes a wonderful song. And like I said, I'm looking forward to it. Who knows? We might do an album review. How about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. But man, I appreciate you. I say it all the time because I mean it. You have a wonderful insight, and you have empathy that when we talk about stuff, I really appreciate, because sometimes I feel like I'm open, but then sometimes you'll say something that just like, oh, and sometimes that's how I kind of feel with your perspective. And I think that's why a lot of times our conversations kind of hits different. And so I always appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying it. That's good stuff, man. You never know what people need to hear. So I deposit that in my love bank, like I appreciate that, because there's always days and moments where you just don't know. And to be affirmed
Yeah.
by a friend is always great. So yeah, man, I appreciate you, and thank you for always having me on.
Well, thank you for being here. This is Jay and Drew with our open discussion review of Kirk Franklin's documentary Father's Day. Until next time, peace.
All right, I'll just like peace.
All right, man. Peace. Thanks for listening, and please like and subscribe. Be sure to check out past and future episodes of this show, along with my other shows entitled The Movie Bench Quarterbacking Podcast and The J and Podcast, available now on all streaming platforms. Until next time, peace.